so we're going to continue with our October Horror-a-thon with Creepshow. Now, Creepshow is a 1982 movie made by George Romero and Stephen King. It is a horror anthology movie, so it contains 5 little short stories. And I gotta say, overall, it's not a really scary movie. And it's not really gory. It has some scares, and it has some gore. Mostly Creepshow is known for its sense of humor and its kind of creepy wackiness. There's some notable stars in this, namely like Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson, Adrienne Barbeau, Hal Holbrook. Yeah, and a few more, and you know, that you're going to recognize. One in particular is Stephen King himself. Now, the movie starts with its little wraparound story of a really strict father finds his son reading a Creepshow comic book, and this comic book it's kind of supposed to be like the old EC horror comics from the 50s and the 60s, and takes it away from him, throws it in the garbage, and punishes the kid and tells him to go to bed and whatever. And this, how dare you start, keep reading this garbage, and it's gonna rot your brain. And meanwhile, he's a grumpy old, I don't know, drunk, a slightly abusive father. But then their comic books, they're going to rot your brain. So yeah, there's a little wraparound story of that, and they resolve that in the very end of the movie. But the first, actual story we get out of here is called Father's Day. It involves an old man that comes back from the grave to get what's his and, prevent his greedy family members from taking all his stuff, I guess. Ed Harris is in it, and he's kind of doesn't really do anything. He dances and he plays some rock music on the radio, and then he gets killed by a falling gravestone or something, encountering this zombie grandfather or whatever. Anyway, that first one, yeah, is just not very exciting. The second one is called The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, and it stars none other than Stephen King as Jordy Verrill. He's a farmer, a poor farmer, lives on his own, on his land, and a meteorite crashes on his property, not far from his house, actually. And so he examines it, and he gets these ideas that, well, maybe I can turn it in and I can get a reward. And we go through little fantasy scenarios in his head of how he's going to deal with bringing this meteor in, and how he's going to be famous, or how his life's going to be better once he shows this meteorite to the world. When he's examining it, though, he accidentally touches it. It cracks open, and he gets some green goo or something on his fingers. So now he's infected with some kind of alien parasitic entity, which eventually grows out from the meteorite, and plants sprout up everywhere, including on the tips of Jordy's fingers, then eventually his entire body, and when he completely turns himself into a plant creature. Then he speaks to his dead father briefly, and then he eventually just decides to end it, and it's okay, and he just kind of gives up, and because he knows it's the end, there's nothing that he can do. And it's kind of tragic, and I guess the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. But it has some humor in there, because Stephen King just plays it kind of he plays a pretty good idiot in this. And overall, this was one of the better of the 5 little horror stories that are in this movie. The third one is called Something to Tide You Over. This one involves Leslie Nielsen is a super rich guy, and he finds out that his wife has been cheating with Ted Danson. Forces Ted Danson at gunpoint to go along with this revenge sort of plot, and abducts his own wife, and he buries her in sand up to her neck, and lets the tide come in and drown her. And he makes Ted Danson watch this on a television, as Ted Danson is also buried up to his neck in sand. Then he goes back to his big mansion, and he watches them die on TV, I believe. Draws himself a bath, pours himself a drink, and celebrates a job well done. Yeah, Leslie Nielsen's pretty freaking creepy in this. They show him as being insane and just a horrible person. He's further driven insane when, of course, predictably, Ted Danson and his former wife rise from the dead, and they come after Leslie Nielsen to kill him in the end. And you can really see the ending coming like a mile away, and it just takes a while to get to it, and the zombies at the end are a little disappointing looking, I guess. I don't know. The effects work, by the way, in Creepshow is done by Tom Savini, I believe, who also appears in the movie as a garbage man, I think, at the very end. They're not terrible. Just in this one sketch, I didn't find it very appealing looking. The next one is called The Crate, and it has to deal with this crate that's been sitting under the stairs in a university basement somewhere, and there's a creature inside it, and remarkably, this creature is still alive. So it's discovered by a maintenance worker and one of the professors at the university who decide to open it. Meanwhile, you have another university professor who has a very loudmouth, abusive, super controlling demon of a wife, can't stand her anymore, and it's just driving him insane. He learns about there being a deadly creature locked inside this crate. He devises a plan to get rid of his wife and lures her towards the crate, and eventually the thing devours her and eats her, and problem solved for this guy, I guess. Now the creature inside the crate is it looks like an ape with like super sharp long teeth and claws, and it messes a bunch of people up pretty bad, and this guy covers up all the evidence and disposes of the crate, and story over. So I guess when it comes to like gore and scare and that sort of thing, this one probably has the most of that. Then we get to the last one, which it's a little more of a psychological sort of horror. But so there's this guy, this old rich guy, lives in this ultra modern apartment, and he controls everything by just talking to people on intercoms and ordering people around, and he's just an ass, and nobody actually likes him, but they're all afraid of him. But he's a germaphobe. He's very afraid of bugs and that sort of thing, and he finds roaches in his apartment. And so he's calling everybody and, you know, blaming everybody for his situation, and you know, trying to get help getting rid of these bugs and stuff. And through his phone conversations that he has with other people, it just shows us just how much of a piece of shit this guy is. How he really kind of deserves the fate that he gets, which is basically to be eaten alive from the inside and out by cockroaches. I think the best part of this sketch is the performance by E.G. Marshall as the old guy. It just really makes you hate this character, and so good job there. Yeah, and then of course we have to resolve the wraparound story. The little kid decides to get revenge on his dad for throwing his comic book away and yelling at him and stuff. So he pulls out a voodoo doll that he ordered through one of these comic book ads in the Creepshow comic. Starts poking it with pins and stuff and setting it on fire, and and the dad's like in agony, and then it ends. That's the end of Creepshow. It's overall pretty entertaining. You get your 5 little short stories, and they're all kind of horror twists on the horror genre. I think they did a really good job of paying tribute to those old horror comics. Overall, I give Creepshow a B-, because it's a B movie. It's a solid movie, but the minus just because of the boring and draggy parts and some lackluster effects in there. Yeah, I don't think you'd regret watching this movie if you like horror movies at all. It definitely has atmosphere, and it has character, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek horror comedy, black comedy. So I guess it succeeds overall. And I will have a couple more horror reviews before the end of the month. And of course, Halloween's coming up, so it's all about horror movies right now. So, you know, bear with me, and maybe you'll, maybe we'll get to one that you really like. Anyway, have a good one out there, everybody.